So you remember when we all pretty much said 2020 was going to be our year? Let's talk about that. First, my last quarter of the year. Every time we travel, my family and we buy a Christmas ornament. And this year we bought like a really cool ornament from Iceland. We got another one when we took the entire family, went to Texas. But you know what? This one's probably my favorite one. Give you the official Tyson Family 2020 Christmas ornament. This year was full of some really tough times, and some of those tough times actually made me take a decent extended break from social media multiple times. This year, while I had many painful moments, there will also be a lot of moments I cherish. It gave me the opportunity to spend some time with my family. It gave me a chance to travel quite a bit. I even asked this beautiful woman I know to marry me. She said yes. I had a stretch of time where I had the most time off to myself that I think I've ever had as an adult, but I've also had some of the busiest stretches I've ever had as being a photographer. So let me take you on a little adventure through one of the toughest years of my life, but also one of my favorite years of my life. And here we go. I started off 2020 by photographing Brooke and Zach's wedding on the first Saturday of the year. I then flew to Augusta, Georgia and photographed this Hampton Inn and was made this awesome dinner by my friend Kyle. I returned the favor of dinner by photographing his kid drinking pickle juice. I drove over to Peachtree, Georgia and photographed the resort there. Peachtree? You fancy. A week later, I flew to Charlotte, North Carolina and photographed a home 2 that was right next to the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, they did not have a statue of my all-time favorite driver. I headed home disappointed, but the whole family and I flew to Austin, Texas to visit my sister, her hipster husband Drew, and this monkey looking at other monkeys. Flying with little kids is tough, but I would do it again in a heartbeat. We came home and I asked Elizabeth's father if I could marry his daughter. He said yes after he went and got his gun. The 1st February, Elizabeth turned 30, and we went to Iceland. I proposed here. It was the highlight of her trip, barely beating out when she got to make friends with the Icelandic horse. I headed down to Peoria and photographed 4 points. Bear and I discovered what you could do with clear balloons, and I flew back to Texas. I photographed this Hampton Inn in Brownsville and this True in Austin. Elizabeth and I hosted an open house for photographers who wanted to dive into wedding photography, and I supported the Ark of Rockford by photographing and then eating a bunch of chocolate. Look them up, they do some amazing things for our community. I headed south to Jackson, Mississippi to photograph a Hyatt, and then I flew over to Charleston, South Carolina where I got to have dinner with this girl, made fun of every photographer who visits Rainbow Row, and I photographed this Hilton Inn / Homewood Suites. I waved to Chicago on the way home and I headed down to Oklahoma and photographed this Embassy Suites. That evening I got Chick-fil-A and I listened to this guy say,
and so in terms of what hurt, pain, suffering, death has happened so far is really just beginning. This is going to unfold for months to come yet, and that's, I think, what people don't quite yet understand.
Wait, he said what? Enter the Rona. I called Elizabeth the next morning from the airport, and I remember telling her that I think this is going to be way worse than what people are making it out to be at the time, and that we need to prepare to have our wedding seasons kind of thrown into chaos. So, we started to prepare right there. And on March 19th, I posted on my Instagram that my fellow creatives better buckle down because this is going to be rough. With all of our unplanned downtime, I took the big kid fishing a bunch to get out of the house. Elizabeth taught Bear how to play the guitar. Finding toilet paper became a reason to celebrate. Bear contemplated life, and I boozed and zoomed with the Rockford wedding industry. Hobbs self-quarantined, and I started running again only to remember that I'm old. Then in April, I had the chance to photograph a little bit more. Elizabeth and I struggled on what we should do, and especially if I need to travel at this time. In the end, I took the opportunity to work. This was Terminal 3 at O'Hare Airport at 9 a.m. on a weekday. Unreal. I went back to Charlotte and photographed this home 2. I came home and photographed my first mini-COVID wedding, Courtney and Christopher. Courtney's mom doubled down on safety though by making sure we all had emergency shots. Jade and I went fishing at sunrise, and I flew to Syracuse to photograph an Embassy Suites. This was Syracuse International Airport. I photographed Megan and Brad's mini wedding. I had to stop making fun of Grace and photograph her wedding. Allison and Phil got married in their backyard and it was perfect. When I was gathering photos for this, I found out that I didn't really take a lot of photographs with my camera or my cell phone that weren't wedding related. I think May was a really rough month for anybody in the wedding industry, and I think that's when it really started to hit us. In June, I flew to Memphis, hopped across the border to Mississippi, and photographed a Hampton Inn and a Hilton Garden Inn. I snuggled this guy in the afternoon for his naps and iced a knot on his head. Elizabeth and I went to Colorado and photographed a wedding, and I took this photo of her that she blasts everywhere and never gives me credit for. We headed down to Colorado Springs, and we spent the evening in the Garden of the Gods, and Elizabeth tapped out at the original Pancake House. I crossed the mighty Mississippi and photographed Kelsey and Jake's wedding, photographed Lisa and Ryan, and also Kaylee and Carl's engagement session. I started bear and explosives training.
Throw it.
Photographed Aaron and Dan's engagement session in Minocqua, Wisconsin. I took Jaden fishing and stayed up there with my family for a few days. I photographed this Hampton Inn in downtown San Antonio and melted into Texas summer. I drove up to Austin to shoot this Hampton Inn. I saw Austin things, and for the first time ever, I got to just swing by my sister's house for dinner. On the way home, I saw this Packer fan, and when I got there, Jaden helped me buy a new car. I flew to the Volunteer State, photographed this true, and got to have dinner with another one of my second shooters. I skipped over to the Garden State, but I didn't see any gardens. I came home, and after being one of my groomsmen way too many times, I photographed Augustino and Kristen's wedding. Julia told Mark not to get any champagne on her. My bad. Bear helped me edit, and I still can't figure out how something so small can create such a big mess. I photographed Kaylee and Carl's wedding and used a fire escape. Jaden learned about 2,000 singers.
What Alanis Morissette song did...
Bear drove recklessly through the house, and I iced another knot. I built a computer with the big kid, and Hobbs helped. Hopped on a jet and photographed one of the coolest Hampton Inns I've ever seen in Greenville, South Carolina. I skipped over to Asheville for this home too, and I really love the Smoky Mountains. I photographed this Homewood Suites in the burbs of Chicago. Lindsay and Mike got the sunset for their engagement session. Jody and Ron danced at their engagement session. Mistakes were made at Austin and Rachel's wedding. Liz was a better model than Tyler. Megan and Paul took me back to the park where they said I love you for the first time. Bear almost likes bread as much as me. Melissa crushed her engagement session and dragged John with her. Melissa and Steven finally got to have their wedding after 3-day changes. At the same time, Megan and Brad had their wedding after 3-day changes as well. I quote Bear, "If it fits, I sits." Melissa got married to the world's ugliest groom. I drove 11 minutes to photograph this home too. I gave some of Kristen's wedding money back to her to cut Bear's hair, and Carmel, Indiana opened this home too. Jamie and Shane partied at their wedding. Bear climbed over the baby gate. Jenna and Kyle had the perfect wedding weather. I showed Meg the lyrics to WAP for the first time. I headed south, and Dallas has a bad football team, but a nice Hampton Inn. Headed west from there to this Phoenix town place that was right next to the place that makes all of us Packer fans sigh. At home, Allison and Brad laughed at Brad, and I got to be in Fredericksburg, Virginia during fall for the second straight year after I got done shooting this true in Washington, D.C. I started off October in Colorado Springs with this hot chauffeur, and the aspen trees in Breckenridge were stunning. Photographed Bailey and Nathan at the Garden of the Gods. Hannah and Hunter pretended they were in Colorado for their engagement session. Natalie and Brandon pulled off their wedding in just weeks. Marisha and Sean's engagement session made me really look forward to their wedding. I photographed this brand new Holiday Inn in Milwaukee. Bear found a recliner in the woods. Leah and Jake smoldered their way through their engagement session. I said goodbye to my Uncle Mike. Hannah and Andy reminded me why I loved weddings. Hobbs wanted to travel with me, but he didn't miss much in Keokuk, Iowa. After 18 months of emails, I finally got to photograph the Embassy Suites a few hundred feet from my studio. Jennifer and Brandon rode off into the sunset. Lindsay and Mike embraced the fall chill. Haley and Blake's dog showed me what he thought of me. Elizabeth and I got in front of the camera for our own engagement session. Emily had her engagement session with Brant or Brett or Brad, I don't know. Melinda and Jacob put their costumes on for their Halloween wedding. Katie and Caleb still managed to pull off their wedding. I got chased by a bear. Red Wing, Minnesota has a country inn and suites, and so does St. Paul, Minnesota. I flew all the way to Hawaii, spent 3.5 days there, and this is the only photo I took. How does that happen?
A good question. For another time.
Bear ate dandelions, so I put him to work.
Keep going. Let's go.
I made a pie out of spite and promptly dropped the first slice on the floor. Jaden is more athletic than you think. and we hung Christmas tree lights without Mom's supervision. Bolingbrook was just a short drive from home. Bear was a dancing fool. Elizabeth and I were models. We loved the new spot for Rockford's Christmas tree. Bear turned the big 2 and then got snowed on. Jody and Ron got to spend time in their own home on their wedding day. I photographed a few more hotels in Milwaukee. The Potato Bandit mic dropped me.
Give me.
And then I came back here to sip my eggnog and make this video. This year has been one of struggles, but also one of growth. It has been a year that through its pain has shown me just how lucky I am to be able to be a photographer. So as we wind down 2020, send a message to your friends that you cherish them, hug your families just a little bit tighter, and no matter what 2021 gives us, let's do a little bit better than we all did in 2020. Cheers.